Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. Thanks for joining me and all of us together for this iteration of the leadership clinics that I've been privileged to host across a few years now. It's been a privilege each time. I think this is the first time that we've had one in back to back weeks. So last week, those of you that tuned in or bought the package know what that was about. And today, what a privilege it is to host Professor Kate Bowler, who is with us. We're grateful to our sponsors who have stuck with us. Some have come on. And by the way, if you are interested in helping us to do these leadership clinics and being a sponsor, please be in touch with Brad Aycock in our office of Fresh Starts and New Beginnings in the West Ohio Conference office of the United Methodist Church. It's a joy when people come and partner with us. And today we're grateful to Ohio Health, which has a significant and an impactful footprint on health care and wellness in central Ohio and is growing all the time. To Cokesbury, which is a part of the United Methodist Publishing House, and we're grateful to Cokesbury, their imprint, Abington, their print, and Amplify, their digital imprint, and to MTSO. The longer version is the Methodist Theological School in Ohio, in Delaware, Ohio. They are our sponsors for today. But let me underscore, if you're interested personally or organizationally in coming alongside of us in sponsoring these good learning events, we would welcome a conversation with you. What are the leadership clinics about? They are about navigating change and seeing the future together. They are about some skill development, and they are also about nurturing and nourishing leaders. And I want to say to you that while we've had a tough run over several years, culture wars, COVID, denominational spats, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, leadership has always been hard work and it's always been challenging. And leaders have always needed nourishment, nurture, and help in navigating where's the next best faithful step in our leadership. And may I say, for those of us that follow Jesus, in our followership, which is at least as important as our leadership. So thanks for joining us. We hope that these are events that help you to navigate, they nourish you, they stimulate thought, they help you to see the future in new and different ways. In a minute, I'll give a more full but not complete introduction of Dr. Bowler, but our format will be slightly different. Most often, we've had our guest to sort of give a 30 to 40 minute sort of straightforward presentation, and then we got to the Q&A. Today, it's going to be all Q&A, and we'll hear Kate tell something of her story, particularly through her written work and whatever she wants to say autobiographically, talk about some of her books, which I'll reference in the introduction. We've got some questions queued up, and you in the audience, we encourage you, raise your questions. We'll take them seriously. If you don't hear it worded exactly like you put it in, it's because there were similar questions, and we tried to aggregate those that were similar together so as to make good use of time and not be unduly or unhelpfully repetitive. But before we move forward, would you allow me, dear friends, to pray for our guest and for all of our time together? Gracious and loving God, thank you for the means to gather across digital space, to be in community, however short term, to come together for learning and for laughter, for nourishment and for help with navigating our roles, our responsibilities, and oh my goodness, God, our lives. We thank you for the encouraging and stimulating and thought provoking people that you have made it possible to come and be with us. And today, we are just blown away with the gift of our sister in the Lord, the Reverend Dr. Kate Bowler, for her scholarship, for her faith, for her transparency, for her vulnerability, for her storytelling. We give you thanks and praise. And we pray that you would set her at ease that she might stimulate us to be at ease in our own lives and to find our heart in your heart. We ask this now as you bind us all together for this experience in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. So, as I said, our guest today is Dr. Kate Bowler, terminal degree, PhD, 3 times best-selling author on the New York Times best-selling book list, and I'm pleased to say an associate professor of American religious history at Duke University Divinity School. I happen to have a unique relationship to that particular seminary, and it's my alma mater. And so I'm grateful that we were able to get Kate to come and for her association with Duke. But she really now belongs to the world in unique and powerful ways. But for what she's doing in academia, both what she's done and for the ways in which she's seen the future, we give God thanks and praise. She's authored, listen to this, I'm going to read from the iPad, blessed, a history of the American prosperity gospel and the preacher's wife, colon, the title continues, the precarious power of evangelical women celebrities. And if I'm not mistaken, that was at its root her dissertation, and then it became a book. And of course, the timeless, everything happens for a reason, and other lies I've loved, which may be the place where many of us first encountered her outside of the academy as she began to tell her story. No cure for being human, and other truths I need to hear. And on this book tour, which we are a part of and delighted to be, her latest, which you see me pointing to now, have a beautiful, terrible day. Everyone who's registered for this event, you know you've received a copy. If you haven't, please be in touch with Brad and Terry in our office of Fresh Starts and New Beginnings, and to make sure you got your copy. And please tell others about it to the extent that it has blessed you. Make it a blessing to other people. We're past Christmas, but you could give them a Lenten gift and share it with them in some way, shape, or form. So, Dr. Bowler, there's much more we could say about you, but I need to stop talking so they can hear your voice. And I wanna jump in and begin with this question. Tell us about how you ended up in the academy,
Yeah.
why church history, why American or North American religious history, and then build a bridge for us to your other work, which seems so storytelling and, may I say, devotional.
Oh, thank you. And guys, thank you so much for having me. You are actually like in the tippy top of all the hierarchy of good and possible things. Methodist pastors are top of my list. One of my very favorite people who I get to work with a lot, Dr. Dan Wells, is an Ohio pastor among you. And every time I
Amen.
talk to him, he's working on a difficult sermon and is wrangling some kind of small group slash hunting club and power washing someone's driveway. So it's a job that's hard to explain. But the way you serve people is so wonderfully granular. And so I admire
Wow.
you all more than I admire basically everyone else, especially dentists. So thank you so much for letting me be with you.
Oh,
Getting to theological education wasn't always on my radar. I have academic parents, and I grew up right on the edge of a university campus. And it just
okay.
also happens to be the lowest ranking university in all of Canada. And so when I would walk outside of my bungalow in the morning to walk to school, I would just smell the endless wafts of manure, which was our university testing its agricultural products. And I thought, wow, higher education is really fancy. And this is the smell of learning. But what I got from my parents was, even though we were, hitting lower middle class and really, really hard, they showed me what a beautiful life of service it can be. They loved their students, but they had also recently become Christians, and I had seen the way it had shaped their
Mm,
understanding of service and a worldview. And so I thought, I think I would love the time to build a worldview. So my dad's a historian, so I wanted to be a historian. And the very first, I used to pray for it. I was like, God, give me a good, like, give me a topic that I won't be bored about like 1 year in. And then I'm from a Mennonite background, and I saw that there was a huge, what I thought was a warehouse that was being built right not far from my house on the only fast road that goes around Winnipeg. And people were pouring out of it, and they were explaining to me that they had just come from Pastor's Appreciation Sunday, where they had given their pastor a motorcycle and that he had ridden it around on stage. And I was like, no, number one, that is for Americans. That is not for Canadians. And two, what makes Mennonites somehow thinking about a gospel of health and wealth? And so that was the beginning
Mm,
of a decade-long obsession that really wasn't just me learning how to be a historian. I learned how to think about how beliefs are built culturally, how I could learn
mhm,
to create an argument around cultural scripts that we inherit, in this case, like a world of hashtag blessed. And so I just realized that spiritual ideas were the most beautiful and also nosiest way to get into what really matters. And so by the time I finished my PhD and a job opened up at Duke Divinity School, I thought, well,
mm.
that was very fun, but I'm actually only good at lecturing, and I'd like to tell you what happened. I don't think I should tell you what might happen or what we might do. Um,
Hmm.
but then honestly, I fell in love with pastors. Like I said, your jobs are so weird. They are so
Mm.
highbrow and lowbrow at the same time. Like, you don't get the dignity of fanciness. You have to be beautifully agile, even as you're being like brilliant and rich and nuanced, and then solving like Bob on the church council garbage and a mold problem. And so I really just realized that theological education was a chance to actually see communities and ideas as they evolve inside with real life people. And so yeah, it's your fault. I never became a pastor. I'm just in love with all of you.
we, and listen, and we love it. Listen, I can't resist before we get to the current book. So your dissertation that came the book, Blessed, and um, the rest of the long title, Health and Wealth, which many preachers then got on the other side of what they were seeing with, let's say, the motorcycle being driven around the
Yeah.
church platform, and said, the health and wealth heresy. They sort of railed against it. And, uh, but uh, I've wondered, as you've studied church history, and I listened to you today, um, what happened to us that we really let culturally
Mhm.
materialism become sort of our God?
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of it is, I mean, we could give an argument about demographics. We could say that, I mean, since World War II, when people started moving to suburbs and away from downtowns and building out theologies that were trying mostly to enshrine the American family, especially the white middle class American family, the Gospels became a little gentler, a little more comfortable, a little more full service, and so much of that was trying to accommodate growth and possibilities. So you see all kinds of lovely possibilities built in. But
Mhm.
what especially happened in the 70s, when American Christianity began to feel itself losing a kind of cultural sway. And to be honest, part of how I secretly track this in my heart, and I would never say this to anybody but you guys, is like, when was the last American mainline pastor publicly cool? Like, when was the last American mainline pastor who say, married a Miss America? The answer is 1972. So, like, when did it stop having that feeling that they were right
Huh.
on the edge of culture? Like, that they could write something and it would immediately become an op-ed in the New York Times. And part of the stress was, oh my gosh, are we losing our cosmopolitan identity? And then, of course, you see the upswing of American evangelicalism. And it basically made itself the suburban faith by saying, Everyone else is going to hell in a handbasket. The reason why you know that God is good is look at us. We will focus on the family. We
Ah,
will be so it had its own version of health, wealth, and happiness that became
mm-hmm.
in all iterations a way of saying of accidentally, in light of a crisis of American confidence in us, saying, don't worry, we don't have to worry about the gospel. We're the gospel. We are show and
Ah,
tell.
ah, yeah. So, from a biblical standpoint, I mean, this is my own comment. You don't need to own my stuff, but that really feels like you've given us a biblical definition of idolatry,
Yes.
which, particularly in the
Yes.
Hebrew Bible, God did not look upon with joy,
Yes.
shall we say? I think it's an
Yes.
is fair and accurate.
Yeah.
So, shifting gears, have a beautiful, terrible day. Why this book? Why now? Why
Hmm.
you?
Well, last year I got stuck in a loop. I, when it comes to problems, I'm kind of a minimalist. I like to just take one problem and let it bludgeon all of the rest of my life into submission. And it turns out that one problem can really just level your life. And I got neck pain, which became more pain, which became more pain. And before I knew it,
Oh,
I was sort of revolving around like an endless sort of human drill. And I guess what had happened was because I'd had so many abdominal surgeries and things from such a long stretch with cancer, and just my the way my body works, I really got stuck in kind of a tar pit and I couldn't get out. And so many
wow.
of us have these loops we get into. A relationship breaks and then we circle around, or a kid starts drifting away and then we find ourselves kind of hoping that we were setting out on a journey in our lives, only to just end up right back where we started. And I felt so overwhelmed by it, because in a day I really ended up, because of the amount of pain I was in, which was so loud, I only had about 1 hour of clear brain space in a day. And so my prayers became less sophisticated and more just like, God, whatever is true about you needs to be true today inside of a very small space. So I started writing these little reflections and then kind of psalms and then a small action step to try to practice a thing which I've been writing about but I'm not good at doing, which is, how do you get sort of let go of the everything is possibilism of all of our prosperity gospels, and we can't turn toward nothing as possible, but get inside of a framework of then what is possible today. So I thought maybe
Hmm.
that is the way to think in my own life about not just how to have a terrible day, but how to have a beautiful, terrible day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When the reference that you started writing, you said like little psalms.
Yeah.
As I read through the book, um, uh, I said this is like a new psalter.
Oh, that's so kind.
They read like psalms to me, um, the pouring out of reflections. And when I thought of the Psalms that are in the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, and we know those aren't all the Psalms that were ever written, but those that got canonized, where people just poured out, and they went from these I don't want to say extremes, but
Yeah.
joy and exaltation to I hate my enemies,
Yes,
and
totally.
they just poured that out, and
Yeah.
not necessarily asking God to sanction hatred, but just acknowledging that I have this angst, I have this hatred.
Yeah.
My bed is the place where I cry all night long,
Yeah.
and it just felt that kind of honest and vulnerable. What keeps us
Yeah.
from that kind of honesty with God, self, and neighbor?
Oh. Well, because if you leave me alone for 2 seconds, I'm a consummate liar. I mean, I will tell you that things are fine. It's wonderful. And also just, I can do it by myself. Thanks. Thanks. I'm fine.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason why spiritual honesty feels most difficult right now is that the cultural scripts that we've been given are extremely confining. And
Hmm.
there's I mean, two strains that go through American culture that make it difficult all the time, which is hardy, aggressive individualism that really becomes enshrined, at least in the mid 1800s. And then a kind of intense um, story about the way we think about what's most spiritually important about us. And since the late 19th century, people would just say the most important thing about us is our minds. It's our mindset. We're supposed to regulate
Hmm.
all emotion and
Hmm.
then crowd it onto the positive side of the spectrum at all times. So, how are you? I mean, think about the last time somebody asked you that and you answered them honestly, maybe at a party, and you can just see
Hmm.
them. And like, just the half a step back, the confusion about what, like, am I supposed to fix it? Am I supposed to tell you that it's going to be okay? But we have really constrained honesty because we are terrified that by admitting that things are difficult, we're opening ourselves up to a very special kind of embarrassment, which is shame, and that we're saying that we've done the great American thing, which is, not mastered our mindset.
Yeah, yeah. So sometimes when we say everything's all right, and you talk about sort of consummate lying, many of us have perfected that, and yet sometimes we engage with people or we're around people on a regular basis and like they
Mhm.
never see anything beautiful,
Yeah,
or at least they don't articulate it. So let's bring the pendulum the other direction. i
totally.
mean all right, total honesty. I'm having a crappy day, my life sucks. I mean how much of that, in other words, if that's your continuing
Yeah,
narration,
yeah.
what's the downside of that? What's the outcome of that?
Yeah. And like, oh my gosh, because Bishop Bomber, you're fun to talk to about this in particular, because we know that there's a specific spiritual version of lying in this one,
Yeah,
and that it has
yeah,
a little bit of possibility inside it that we actually think is spiritually beautiful. So, like, let's frame it
yeah,
out a little
yeah,
bit, which I like.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So, and we're going to so let's pretend that honesty is not just saying everything sucks, but it's saying that we're seeing everything as it is, which is
Yeah. Okay.
Stephen Chapman, the Old Testament professor at Duke Divinity School, is writing this beautiful book on blessings right now. And he calls blessing
Okay.
emplacement, like this goes here, that goes there. So the
Mm,
Psalms
mm,
being a beautiful example of blessing because they're emplacement. God, I really actually would rather see my enemies suffer and die. Also, and where were you? God, you are love, you are food, you are bread, you are light, you are. So but it allows, honesty
hmm.
lets us put things in their place. Now, I think that's
Okay.
our actual definition of blessing and honesty. But in terms of the spectrum of how we think about um positivity, we can find that positivity on the plus side is an opportunity for resilience. It lets people reframe, maybe look with new eyes at a situation that they thought was entirely bad. That's not what people do. They either tend to crowd over to everything is the worst, or I mean, and then they'll say, like, well, with this election cycle, and then it's an endless decline narrative. And we don't want any of us or our congregation to live there. You live there, you're living in a world where God can never make anything new, nothing beautiful. There can be nothing beautiful inside of a terrible day, that we can't actually grow and evolve even inside these tight constraints of our country, our structures, and our life. Blah.
Hmm.
And it's
Hmm.
also just kind of
Hmm.
annoying to be around. Like, also, to be honest, I think pessimism, I'm just going to say that's another kind of lying. They are
Ah.
pretending because it confirms their own fear that if they act, it wouldn't matter anyway. And that's
Uh-huh.
despair. And so many of us,
Okay.
especially when we're sick, overwhelmed, whatever, despair feels more real. Now, I want to talk about the other side for 1 second because we sometimes get stuck with it. There's the other kind of not living in reality, and that's people who dial hope up so loud that you're not allowed to say anything else. And they're like, "Isn't God a good God?" And you're like, "Actually, I just said that my family died on the Oregon Trail of dysentery on its way west." They just won't ever let you tell the truth. So we're going to just say that telling the truth offers us a lot of options, spiritual options, and it won't look it won't look like endless Tigger, and it won't look like sort of Deborah, who always
Yeah.
hangs out near the door of the church.
Sure. So it feels sounds like part of what I'm resonating with is that we have in some cultures, and you've focused on North American culture, um, made an idol of happiness,
Yeah.
and and we need to veer away from all idolatry. And what
Yeah.
you're offering us, and what you referred to a colleague who's working on something, is perspective.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
this seems too simple, but sort of balance,
Yeah.
integration, interdependence of our
Yeah.
lives. Is that
Yeah.
making sense of what you're trying to say?
I love that, and like a softer gratitude, because so much of us, we want like then all of a sudden if we're going through something awful, we feel like the gratitude police are knocking on the door and they're just about to decide if you were sufficiently aware of all the good things. And yet
Yeah, yeah,
gratitude as a gentle art of noticing. Like when
yeah.
I was when I was having my very worst days, it was October and I thought I'd die in June. And I still had to try all the hard things, and I'd have to go to the hospital, and I felt felt physically awful, and everywhere I looked was somebody else suffering because of my suffering. It was very hard to look around and see anything good. And so I put a big whiteboard on top of my fireplace, and every single time something small happened, um, a delicious snack, an opportunity, a nurse that allowed me to pretend that he was a vampire and that when I leave the room, he uses my blood for his own purposes. You know, it went on the board. And like
Oh my gosh.
all of those were me practicing a gentler gratitude. But if someone had said, you better be grateful, I'd be like, really? You want me to be grateful in stage 4 cancer? There's no stage 5, sweetheart. This is it.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you. Well, speaking of the medical technician that allowed you to imagine that he was a vampire, I think I have
I
it right.
love you saying
Um,
that. It makes
yeah,
me
yeah,
so happy.
yeah. um, at the beginning of the book, which
Yeah.
I'll point to again, "Have a Beautiful, Terrible Day," there's essentially this dedicatory thing to, is it Roger? And
Yeah.
tell us
Yeah.
how we see, name, and identify the Rogers in our lives.
Mm. Roger Lloyd was the librarian at Duke Divinity School. And it's so funny. When I first moved to Duke, and this is maybe one of the weirdest parts, and I'm sure we all have a version because, you beautiful martyrs are like appointed to your places. And that we end up in communities where we think, well, these are my people, but they're not my people. Like when I need something, I'm gonna have my own version. And when I when I started at Duke, I remember there was this famous professor, Reynolds Price, and he had written a book in which he'd gotten also very ill. And that like the person
Yes,
that he shared a
yes.
printer with was the person who took him to the hospital. And I remember in my little book club thinking, oh, how sad. Colleagues, oh, how sad. It just seemed like such a small approximation of what I imagined my life was going to be, which was surrounded by close friends and family and fun things. And then cut a few years later, I get incredibly sick and I have to go to the hospital before any of my family can get there from Canada. And lo and behold, who's there? The people I share a printer with. And they were
Wow,
not
wow.
necessarily the people I thought I was going to spend the most, intense times of my life with. Uh, but it was such a testimony to me that you sometimes you don't pick your people. Your people, the saints are the people that pick you. And like Roger picked me
Huh, huh.
the most hilariously, and I don't think his family would mind me saying, least charismatic person in the historical division. Like he was just like kind of grouchy. Turns out though, Roger like helped run a ministry, families moving forward to help house
Yeah,
families in churches. He showed
yeah,
up at
yeah,
3 or 4 a.m. weekly to drive me to the airport and let me listen to an NPR show on the periodic table of elements. It would always be like next week boron. And meanwhile,
yeah,
Roger
yeah,
is bringing such absurd kindness because he decided that somebody else's pain was louder than his own. And so when I think
wow,
about you all, I think, without you, the universe cannot turn. And so
yeah.
for you, I am grateful for all of the Rogers.
So the saints and angels are the people that find us,
Yes.
not that we find them. And would it be fair to say, as you have mused and prayed over this, that in some way they're everywhere, but you don't know them
Yeah.
until you know them.
Yeah. And honestly, and I'll say like in my arrogance, I thought that a life is something kind of you pick, you curate your life. Like that is
Yeah.
entirely untrue. I just honestly, I didn't know
Yes.
it.
Yeah. 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 Wow. 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 The profound way in which things come together. So you use a word in some of your more recent writing that you say you've purloined, so to speak, borrowed generously from Dorothy Day.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Precarity.
Yeah.
Walk us through, what is precarity? Why Dorothy Day? How did you stumble upon it?
Yeah. Well, it's such a spot on way to describe this way of being in the world where we recognize its fragility and its dependence. It's Precarity is kind of a fun word because it means sort of given as a favor, something that you're not really in control of, something that can be given, but also taken away at any time. And so when we
Mhm,
say that we decide to sort of give up on the idea that we are self-mastering winners, like beautiful cyborgs who will never need Roger because we can run our own lives, uh, we find ourselves maybe wanting to say different things. So, like, how are we? Precarious. How are we? Dependent. How are we? Fine until we need help in about 2 seconds. And so
mhm,
when Dorothy Day, who's this Catholic activist in New York who began and continued her ministry working in the Great Depression in the slums, and when she talks about precarity, I guess what I love about it is you'd think that somebody who sees that much suffering is going to say that precarity is the bad thing, that precarity is the thing we need to get over. We just want to go
mm,
back to certainty, durability,
mhm, mhm,
like a, a, a sort of seamless feeling that our lives are, and really all the structures in our lives will stay whole. And instead, she says, like, precarity isn't the enemy. It is a part of our life of faith. And that's kind of really opened up for me a different way of thinking about then the relationship between hope and fear. Like instead of then
mhm.
saying that knowing that we're precarious and feeling that fear kind of bubble up, that doesn't make us less faithful. That allows us to have eyes that see reality. And then our spiritual work is trying to learn to adjust the dials so that our fears are not so loud that we cannot see the possibility.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A number of places you've referenced in your writing and today, at least three times today, you've referred to American culture, and you've looked at certain aspects that are slippery. You've
Yeah.
not thrown it under the bus, but to say these need care, these need attention about how we treat them is the way I've taken the message in. Are there places or other cultures outside of North America that we ought to pay attention to where their way of being about certain things
Mm,
could be instructive? So, for example, I had a conversation yesterday with a colleague and a friend who comes from a Pan Asian culture.
yeah.
And he had delivered a homily, and then I was commenting on it in the hallway. And we were talking, I was saying, let me own it, that um, part of our struggle here is we are driven by individualism, which you referenced a little while ago. And in Pan Asian, African, Latinx culture, there's a greater emphasis on the community. So let's
Mhm,
go to South Africa, Ubuntu thinking in Southern Africa. I am because we are.
mhm,
So, are there
mhm.
places we might be looking, not because we're bad, but because there are things to be learned?
Yeah, Bishop, I think that's exactly the right way of framing it is where are the places that teach us um interdependence that we don't reflexively have here because this is the water that we drink.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
um it kind of reminds me of one of my very favorite people and one of my very favorite podcast guests is this doctor named Ari Johnson, and he
Hmm,
works in Mali. Uh, he, I, what they discovered about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, that Mali had the highest rate of the death of the mother in the birth of a child, and that maternal
Ah,
death rates were at such shocking levels, but they were constantly having revolution, civil war, famine, and rampant disease. And so, what to do? He's been working in that country with this beautiful community of local women who then decided to bring medical care door to door by asking a simple inventory of questions and learning how to get ahead of what would then become a fatal um, outcome. But what he learned from being there, he was like, Kate, they, everywhere you go, all they want to do um, is bless me. And their greetings are, bless you, bless you, bless you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And like there are no strangers, as opposed to one of the jokes about when North Americans host people is in other cultures, they're like, here, take my bed, here, take my, take my home. And here we're like, you have one small guest towel, please put it in the laundry room on your way out. And so they're like, welcome, welcome, welcome. It allowed him to think communally to solve, and they now have, I think it's in the top, they have now on par with the United States, Mali, despite all, in over 20-year revolution in maternal health care. And he said it's all because of their attitude of there are no strangers. And that has like landed in my heart in a way that said, for someone who always
wow.
thinks I'm just trying to run my day, welcome, 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 bless you, bless you, bless you, and like can
Yes.
solve
Yes.
seemingly unsolvable
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you've done some work and some writing, and some of it's in this book. It's elsewhere on blessedness and blessing. So, what when someone says or might say of themselves, how are you? And they respond, I have a friend who says, I am blessed.
Yeah.
Um, if they were to, if someone says that, what's a what's the healthy exegesis of saying I am blessed? And then part two of the question is, what does it mean to
Mm.
bless others
Mm.
in your way of seeing things?
Yeah. Well, if we look at, it's so funny that like when I named my first book Blessed, A History of the American Prosperity Gospel, I mean, no one had named a book Blessed before, which was so funny. It was just open highway.
Wow.
And that's because it was right before the enormous rise of what social media has done to our way of presenting each other, to ourselves, to other people, and our way of speaking. And it gets back to that thing we were talking about before, is the ways in which we play show and tell. And so in our #blessed world, what people normally find is they'll say, how what people often say when they say, how are you blessed, is it becomes a kind of accomplishment. Like trip to
Ah.
Maui, #blessed, 50th anniversary, look at my gorgeous family, #blessed. And then also a lot of like barely their bikini shots, super #blessed. But like what it prevents. And also, can we just say that it used to only be mailed to us annually in the form of a Christmas card, in which we got an onslaught of people explaining how absolutely terrific their lives have been. No
Yes.
asterisks.
Yes.
Not seen in this photo is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
the terrible awesome. I mean,
Oh.
and for people who don't have lives that need explanation, so happy for them. But it really
Yeah.
prevented us from being able to even find the right spiritual language to kind of bless the lives we actually have. And so I think that's why I love the Judeo-Christian tradition of blessing as that kind of quality of attention, where we learn to emplace, we learn to notice the good as well as the bad. So that way we can say in the middle of an awful experience, and like one of the things that is possible to do then, even then, if we can't say right now I feel blessed, we have the ability then, especially as Christians, to toggle back and forth between not just, the present moments, but we can look back at evidence that God was there or that love was there, like little breadcrumbs sprinkled throughout our lives. And we can look at that and say, blessed. Like that was so blessed. And then that gives us like that little spark of hope that we can look ahead and we can say, God, you're going to be there too. Like, won't you put everything in its order so that I can see a future where beautiful things are possible. So I think blessed can do lovely things as long as it doesn't happen on the beach. No beach
On the
shots.
beach.
No beach
Gotcha.
shots, thank you.
Gotcha.
Sunset's
And
fine. No beach shots.
and be and you're saying be a little more transparent about your family in those Christmas letters. And
I wanna, oh my gosh, if anyone gets an honest Christmas letter,
yeah, yeah,
actually,
yeah.
my friend who I work with, one of my best friends, Jessica, she has co-written a lot with me, and her grandma accidentally writes these horrifyingly honest letters. They're like, Jess isn't any longer with Carter. I don't know why. Maybe she's too pretty? Question mark. And then just let it
Oh,
go. And like we have
yeah.
framed that Christmas letter. So maybe not.
I
Maybe
know. Yeah, kind of. How much Lake Wobegon can we take, where all of the kids are above average, and sometimes I get that sense in the letters, even though you know generationally people do
not.
want to see those who've
Yeah.
come behind them
Yeah.
achieving and all of that, because you don't want to poo-poo
No.
that your child, your grandchild, is you know
Yeah.
got a great score on the
Yeah.
ACT,
Yeah.
and on the other hand. How is that speaking to those who are having to pay for intervention if they can afford it to
That's
help their
right.
child get ready for the ACT? That's
Yeah.
that's that kind of thing. So what are ordinary ways we can bless the people we're passing by or
Mm.
that we interact with on a regular basis
Oh, that's so
without
nice.
being syrupy?
Oh,
Yeah.
I really like that. Well, because I think just recognizing that most of the people we meet are really weighted down by our culture's exhausting perfectibility paradigm. That most people
Hmm.
are so burdened by the feeling that everything was supposed to be possible if you only,
Yeah.
master your inbox and commit to this new health regimen. Like January, everyone feels like losers. And we just need to know that January feelings, that everyone we meet for at least the next 7 days still feels like their life isn't adding up. And so I think maybe one way of blessing people, like in my case, I always really liked when people noticed anything that felt like I was being myself and contributing to the world in some way. Like,
Hmm.
um, you know, I really love how, and then just something dumb or like noticing the little possibilities in somebody else's lets people kind of try to like add momentum to the things that are already good. Because most of us
Hmm.
are scrolling through social media all the time, looking at the effects of a $12 billion health and wellness industry, and worried that we were already supposed to have apparently immaculate kitchen closets and budget line items, and we already know how to love ourselves and eat ourselves whole.
Yeah.
And instead, we have these unimproved, unconquered lives. So anything that
Yeah.
blesses people's humanity and kind of notices an area in which they're trying. I mean, but you're taking it from me. I'm someone who, when I see a woman do a pull up at the gym, I start crying. I'm just so happy for them.
I'm with you. And sometimes, it's as somebody that's sort of on the move, where my life is touched by a lot of people in the so-called service industry.
Yeah,
Um, Saying good morning, good afternoon, remembering a person's name if you're in a hotel more
that's
than one
nice.
night or a restaurant, and the way I see them perk up, like, oh my gosh, their faces saying, "You remembered my name."
That's nice.
You had breakfast here yesterday, and I'm serving you again, and you remembered my name. They don't say it out loud. It's that big smile. I don't do it for that reason, but I observe what it seems to do for them, that they are seen,
Yeah.
they are acknowledged, their work is um, received with a sense of gratitude. Like, you don't have to do this. I mean, I know you need
Yeah.
to make a living, but you don't have to do this, and you don't have to
Yeah.
be nice to me
Yeah.
while I'm ordering my eggs over easy.
Yeah.
And so it's, I think it's a lot of little things. So,
Yeah.
speaking of big and little things, you use this phrase, um, getting from the red alert crises um, to, and I'm going to add to managing the chronic.
Mhm.
What's that about?
Mm. Yeah. And also, Bishop, I completely believe that you are amazing at opening questions with people that make them feel
Oh,
seen. I believe. Do you have a couple go-to questions that you ask people when you're kind of hoping? I mean, you're in a situation, you've got maybe just 5 minutes, but you want to
yeah,
make a meaningful connection. What do you ask?
yeah. Well, their name, and
Yeah.
I try. I'm not one of these people that if they have a name tag on, I lean in and start
Yeah.
like,
Hello,
I just
Brittany.
ask them. I just ask them their name,
Yeah.
and people like to say their name, and then I usually say who I am, not what I do. Who I am, and especially like if I'm sitting on an airplane,
Yeah.
I hate the inevitable. Well, what do you do for a living?
Yeah. And then they
And
start
that kind of thing.
confessing.
Why are you on this plane? And so, I mean, asking them their name
Yeah.
without being intrusive, um, you off to a good start today if it's
That's
morning,
nice.
and that kind of thing. I think the other thing about helping people feel seen is expressing gratitude. Thank you.
Mm.
I was in a hotel this week, 3 nights, ran out of Kleenex in the dispenser in the property, and I asked one of the housekeeping staff in the hall, um, could they help me get some more Kleenex? And in fact, when I was trying to ask the question, someone else came along because I later figured out that this individual's English was not their first language.
Mhm.
And so another colleague said it to them in their mother tongue, and she lit up and said, "Oh!" and then reached under the cart and handed me a fresh box of tissue or Kleenex. I don't know what the brand was, and then figuring out what the mother tongue was, I said thank you in her language. Now,
Aw,
I know how to say good morning and thank you probably in a dozen languages, and that's it. I'm not
that's
conversational
nice.
outside of American English, so I don't try to perpetrate. But those are little things with people that you just sort of meet.
Yeah.
But I find remembering people that you're around all the time are often surprised that you remember that they shared some challenge or some great thing in their lives. So when
Mhm.
you ask someone, well, tell me, how's your mom doing? 6 months ago,
Mhm.
you needed to take some time off to go to
Mhm.
another city to care for a parent. And when you check in on that, months later, the crisis is gone. I've found that that seems to build a connection that says I'm seen and I'm cared about.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is, people have asked me when I've said, would you pray for my loved one? And then, they check in on it because I tease people, hey, you asked me to pray for you. You haven't, let me use this cliche. I didn't hear what the praise report is. And, when
Cute.
the crisis was over, what's the outcome? So
Cute.
I think it's the little things that dignify
Yeah.
um, people's humanity and dignify that not every moment is like an up
Mhm.
moment of happiness. It's a grind. And
Yeah.
let me end with this. There was a prominent pastor, now deceased in America, served a large church in New York, not one of our modern mega churches, but I would say an old school mega church,
Mhm.
and in Brooklyn, New York. And I heard him say once in a presentation to clergy, he said the thing that humbled him most was as he stood in the pulpit every Sunday, was to look out on the congregation and to understand and see and feel the great dignity
Mm.
with which people were carrying on their lives
Mm.
in spite of all that he knew as their pastor that they were going through. Now,
Mm.
I never heard him utter the word resilience,
Mm.
but he was defining resilience, the
Mm.
great dignity with which people carried on their lives
That's
in
so
spite of the
moving.
crises that they were navigating. I've never
Yeah.
forgotten
That's
his poetic
beautiful.
way,
Yeah.
of putting it. So I don't
Yeah.
know if that sort of
Yeah.
responds meaningfully.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. That reminds me of when I was very sick and I would be, say, in a mall and I would see all of the ridiculously glossy images everywhere, and everyone looked impossibly beautiful and invulnerably, agelessly um, happy. And it felt in those moments like everything I ever wanted was impossible. And it kind of stoked a sort of hunger that like I will never be full again. I will never. And then I made a rule. And the rule was no more. There will be no more looking at any of the window displays. There will only be looking at the faces of the people who are in the mall. And that
Ah,
spiritually
ah,
did when all of a sudden then it's the mom and she's got a stroller and she really just wanted a shirt and her kid is drooling over everything, but the other kid is doing something extremely funny and somebody looks tired and someone looks joyful and somebody else is just like hurried on to the next thing. But their faces, it reminds me of in Gilead, there's a beautiful line of the old man describing his son. And he said, you know, it's not that he's a beautiful, like a beautiful boy. Like he's not like better looking than other kids. He's like, but a face like that, it makes a claim on you.
yeah,
And
it
I love
does.
the feeling that when I actually look at people's faces and the claims they make on us just as people, I think, man, aren't we so beautiful? All of
Yeah,
us.
yeah, yes, yes. Listen, this has been a ball and continues to be for me. We're not quite done. I want to make sure we've got some questions. All
Let's do
right,
it.
Terry,
Yay.
Terry, drown me out and let Kate hear from other voices.
Hi, Kate.
Hey.
So, Sarah from Marysville, she's a new church plant pastor,
Oh, good
and
for
she
her.
says, if you were to plant a new United Methodist church, what would you be sure to include to cultivate a culture of vulnerability, authenticity, and grace?
Oh, that's so nice.
And
Um,
what are some of your greatest hopes for church communities moving forward?
mm.
Mm, fabulous.
Oh man, it's so great because they don't know that we're Methodist anymore for the most part. Like, most, I make a lot of Methodist jokes like in a regular day, and the number of people are like, "What?" I'm like, "Oh, okay, okay, okay. Our labels are not your thing," which offers us an opportunity because I think that you're exactly right that modeling a kind of authenticity, that is the premium authenticity in the age of AI, authenticity in the age of social media, like that we are bringing them a kind of way of being human. So, I mean, there's so many beautiful ways to do it that are like high church, medium church, low church, but I tend to find that prayer is probably the most obvious time to like get people on and off script, where we do the creeds and we offer people the opportunity to get like the nice rough, like the template of our faith. But then like just don't be afraid to do the real prayer. Uh to be like, God, for so many, this week was terrible. Or like, there was devastation. I mean, devastation in the news again today. So I think like not being quite as precious is one thing that people want. And of course, being able to like do what we do, because what we have, to be honest, what we have above and beyond anyone else is the precision of our beautiful theological language. So use it and don't be afraid to flex with it. We've
Huh.
got the terms. We don't just say progress, it's sanctification. Like we've got it all, but
Yeah,
like I would say
yeah.
just don't be so worried about making it a precious moments version. People want the rougher cut.
Wow. Thanks, Sarah from Marysville. Got
Yeah,
another
Sarah,
question,
I'm
Terry?
excited for you and your new plant. That's amazing. I'm so impressed.
Yeah.
Yes, so Mackenzie from Columbus says, who has been a spiritual hero in your life?
Oh, well, that's lovely. I will say that a big hero of mine is Beth Moore. I
Mm,
didn't expect that because Beth Moore is a Southern Baptist preacher who I had studied in my research for this book called The Preacher's Wife. Spent about 5 years going around interviewing mostly conservative women, trying to understand why they had so much spiritual influence in the marketplace, but very little institutional authority, which really is the reverse of mainline women that have much greater degrees of institutional authority and much lower degrees of the availability to like work inside the marketplace. And I was like, what is even going on? And so I
Mm.
interviewed Beth, and she just seemed like, she's mega church gold. She's got, she's like spectacular Southern lady. Well, gosh, if you read her memoir that came out this last year called All My Knotted Up Life, I walked away with such tremendous awe that somebody who has no good reason to keep loving Jesus has been built up and sustained and loved by Jesus in a way that like absolutely blows my mind. The church was the place of her greatest hurt and also the most incredible fortification against everything that could harm her. And I just like I find seeing women of faith to be such an insanely beautiful thing to see up close. So yeah, Beth Moore.
Wow, great, great. Terry, any more questions right now from our audience?
Yes, I have another one.
Cool.
Carrie from Wisconsin says, I really appreciate your podcast and especially your interview style. What is your process for preparing for the interview, and what is your sense of one who knows pain is more empathetic to others who know pain?
Mm, that's so nice. Okay, well, thank you for listening to the podcast. It's called I just called everything up. And I like to make everything in neon. It's actually extremely affordable, friends. If anyone wants a neon sign for their church, it's only about $250. Um, I prepare for the podcast a lot in a similar way to the way I prepare for
Okay.
classes. And I bet if you wanted to do an interview, it would probably feel about the same for you, where I read a lot, but I definitely read the book that we're talking about. And then if it's say, I imagine we budget an hour, but then I come up with about 13 questions. And the way I do it is you give people a nice gentle one, because everyone is always kind of tight and weird at the beginning of a conversation. And then you let them say the things that really are like the bowling down the middle, beautiful things that everyone needs to hear. But then I structure for discovery, which is to say, I don't actually know what they're going to say. But if I let myself not know, even though I'm so nervous wanting to make them feel comfortable, but at the same time, like I'm always talking to somebody and it always creates awe. But I love the idea that when it comes to God in particular, I don't know everything there is to know, especially inside my story. And so it kind of, it's the kind of thing where you can only see it if you see it through somebody else's eyes. So I guess that's maybe my favorite thing is I I only half know what's going to happen. And that teaches me over and over again the magic, like the transcendent magic of other people. So
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
lets structuring for discovery is my process.
Wow, structuring for discovery. Great. Terry, anyone else right now?
Yeah, yes,
Great.
you are in remission from stage 4 cancer. How are you doing?
Oh, thanks. Yes. I I had about 2 apocalyptic years, 2 pretty dramatic years after that, and then like oh hey, this is going pretty well. So that was, I like to think of it like the Smokey the Bear forest fire thing, where it was like red and then like orange, and then with the way I am right now is I'm sort of yellow, lightly touching orange. So they scan for me regularly. I keep having sort of new colon cancer related symptoms. So they're just like always watching me. So because of that, my life is always a little precarious. But I have a bajillion times better than I was before. So this is why and you can always hear it in cancer patients or anybody who's gone through something. There's like so much qualification around how they are. So instead of being like, I'm in remission, it's a miracle, everything is great, all those things feel half true. And then it's not terrible. It's so much better than it was. But life will unfold, and I gotta stay awake.
Yeah, yeah. Do you, picking up on just a little bit of that, do you make a distinction for self or in the way in which you frame it, if you were teaching it or sharing your story between um, being healed and being cured?
Oh, yeah, right. And I'd love to hear you on it because like these are tender topics, right? And when
Yeah.
because I studied miracle faith healers for a decade. I have been to Israel with Benny Hinn, in which people paid to be baptized in the River Jordan as he lightly tapped them on the head while sitting under a giant blue Nestea umbrella. And other people were, some of them were being rebaptized for the third time because they wanted to be healed. So I've seen promises and language of cures go bananas. And then I've
Mm,
seen people not able, because of their own fears, to acknowledge the beautiful things that have been done and that God has done. And
mhm,
so I always like the language of healing because I know
mhm.
that I am healed and being healed. That gives me a process language. But
Aha,
um,
aha.
but cured is hard, um, in part because with my illness, things keep kind of coming back. And so I think that's maybe why I just started thinking of and saying to myself, Kate, life is a chronic condition. So in that way, every
Yes.
good thing is still a beautiful thing in process.
Yeah. Thank you. And that distinction, I'm thinking of two people in my life
Yeah.
that colleagues in ministry, and so I'm going back 30 years. How you doing? They'd
Mm,
been through lots of treatment. One for a
mm,
long-term upper respiratory thing, and the other for cancer. One now deceased, and the other still living, but retired. And I'm thinking of a colleague that looked at me and said, "Greg, I am healed. I'll never be cured."
ah,
And
yeah.
it struck me, and I've carried that with me since the '80s.
Mm,
And the genesis of my question was my own mother struggling with colorectal cancer,
ah,
on top of being a lupus patient when there was
ah,
so little that could be done about lupus. So it
wow.
came from a place of um, some struggle and some groping on
Yeah.
my own part, and now as someone who has to have more frequent checkups just because of family history, not because of anything that is wrong, but your family history
Hmm.
dictates you get your colonoscopy more frequently than other people, and thanks be to God for that. I'm
Yeah.
grateful for that. So thanks for sharing your reflection on that. Let me turn back to Terry. Anybody else right now in the queue, Terry?
Yes,
Cool.
I have Andrea Curry from Bowling Green, and she says, "What is your advice on setting healthy boundaries around your time that honor your body, your values, and
Mm.
your family?"
Whoa. Yeah, that's true. That's hard because um, for so much of the first couple of decades of me doing anything, I had I had a lot of boundaries around, like, was it good for other people? I had almost no boundaries about what was good for me. And so I found myself in these chronic overuse situations where I I eventually lost use of my arms for about 2 years. I had to do my entire dissertation with voice dictation at a time in which going like transcendence, comma, over and over again into this program was only saying the word transference over and over again.
Hmm.
I really had to exoskeleton most of my life because and I'm just going to be very honest, I have not a lot of natural self-esteem, not a lot of natural feelings of self-worth. And so I can't just say like, what do I feel? Like what I feel is like a shrug and you should probably be paying attention to other people right now. So I've tried
Hmm.
to build out pretty tight habits, especially because I'm a mom. So I only work in certain hours and I work very diligently. And then in those hours, and honestly, part of it is, and I bet you have the same, like, I bet if I asked you, you have the same thing with like your sermon process. You're like, this is how I know when I can have a good thought. This is the time of day I know I can have it. I got to have it done by whatever before I edit it. I try to structure it around my vocation. So my boundaries, I need to support my vocation, and then I need them to support my loves. But learning that has been maybe one of the toughest roads for me because it didn't bubble up from who I am.
Hmm. Great, great. Terry?
Yes, I have another question from
Great.
Jamelvia in Toledo. What language do you use in structuring for discovery?
Hmm.
Like, well, what structuring for discovery means to me is that I have I've reached the point of like the end. So I've helped facilitate somebody else's language and I've used my own, but that I'm asking a question that I don't know that they'd have to probably create new language for. So I guess it's kind of like we try to like you draw a map and then you figure out when you're going to both walk over the edge of the map. So that's what I do in interviews. And it's also really how I write anything at all is I try to write everything that I can borrow or know how to do. Like right now I'm writing about joy. I'm writing about it because I actually know that I don't know that there's like so much more I don't know. So I'll write my way to the edge of the map and then I'll kind of be like, "Bleh," and then I'll have to set up experiences, conversations, and readings where I learn to discover.
Hmm. Love it. I love it. Terry, we got time at least for one more from our audience.
I think we're good.
We're great. Okay, good. So I've got, let me give you one broad question. And of course, it may be more narrow as you hear it. And then I want to get to the red zone, what on television they might call the lightning round. And I think these are just sort of get to know Kate better kinds of questions.
Cute.
And it's not right or wrong. It's not a test. You cannot fail. And but you seem to have, let me use, these are my words, a love-hate relationship with the self-help industry.
I do. Yes, I really
and
do.
so I hope I'm not overstating it, but I want to throw it out there. Kind of talk us through that.
Oh, sure. Well, because the self-help industry self-help is an inspirational form of literature that really took off with the rise of American cities. And it was usually cheap paperbacks or pamphlets in which people were trying
Uh-huh.
to explain like ways to get ahead. But it was also a way of saying, why do some people rise to the very top and other people fall all the way down? And
Gotcha.
the kind of inspiration that's supposed to spur action, then all of a sudden I am hooked because I am such a progress monster. Like all I want to do is climb a ladder that I have built with my own efforts to get somewhere. So I'm always like 5 quick tips for blah, blah, blah. Like I unironically bought a book the other day called The Happy Inbox because my inbox is going to be mastered. I will never get out. The problem is
Yeah.
self-help has wonderful tools. It's always trying to teach us to use something in order to achieve a goal. The problem is as a worldview, it is deeply flawed. Brings us back to that individualism, which is unsustainable.
Mm-hmm.
It also
Mm-hmm.
pretends that every good thing, I mean, like just as Christians, we would say, like, think about all the virtues or the gifts and also the gifts of the spirit. You know, peace isn't good just because it makes us feel good. Peace is a sign of God's presence in our life and the character of God,
Wow.
God's self, you know? So we're always like, every time we try to like make it for something, we've really kind of like sucked out the middle of why the thing is evidence of God in the world. So we overuse and then we overuse things, we overuse people, and then we get kind of caught up in the hustle train. So, yeah, I always feel it's incredible, sweet, seductive siren song. And then I have to be like, and so if that's true, everybody feels it. And then what can that teach us about where, where we need to like make more space for God's story to break in?
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I love it. All right. We're in the lightning round now.
I'm excited. This
Red
is going to get
zone.
controversial,
And
Bishop.
the,
I'm hoping that
yeah.
it's going to get really
No.
controversial. Let's do it.
Okay. Well, hey, it's not that serious. It's not that serious. So, your favorite leadership quote?
Oh, a Lutheran megachurch pastor said it to me the other day. It was from the Karate Kid. Your focus needs focus.
Okay, I love it. Most influential leader on your life?
Oh, wow. Um, it's probably Bishop Will Willimon. He's the only
Okay,
person who
great.
calls me out from the pulpit, and he taught me that progress is good.
Gotcha, gotcha. Greatest world leader or most world leader you most admire of all time?
Hmm. Um, gosh. Uh, wow, that's really hard. Okay, look, I can only think of bad things. I actually didn't hate Brian Mulroney, a Canadian Prime Minister in the early 90s, but everybody hates him. Don't tell anybody. I did kind of like Brian Mulroney.
All right, got it, got it. The last book you read.
Um, I read Samantha Bee, the comedian's memoir, I Know I Am, But What Are You? And it is absolutely filthy, and it is the funniest comedic writing I have read in a very long time.
Okay. Your favorite podcaster and or blogger.
Um, I love Brene Brown just published something yesterday about the last season of her life caregiving for her mom that is spectacular. I find her descriptions of grief and love so beautiful. And
Great.
yeah, there's so many great podcasts. Uh, but it's mostly that like I see like I everywhere I go I get to be part of this network, so then I get obsessed with everybody's like right now I just hung out with Emily Freeman and her The Next Right Thing is gorgeous if you want a little spiritual
Yeah.
encouragement.
Great, great. The top song on your current playlist.
Oh, it's I'm so I was this is I don't know why I was among the top 4% of Spotify listeners of Taylor Swift, which is so
Okay.
embarrassing. So it's a Taylor Swift song called Question. Just had to look.
Question. All
Yeah.
right. Your favorite hymn.
Yeah, it's the I don't even but what if it's not the name of it, but it's the It Is Well With My Soul. What's the
It
name
is
of that
well.
one?
Okay.
It's the great,
That's
then
close.
that's what it is.
That's close
Okay.
enough. It's either going to show up in the hymn book as "It is well with my soul" or "When peace like a river." So you're in there. We got you. Your favorite potluck dish.
Oh yeah. Mennonites are so gross because sometimes they'll bring something. It's always has Jello, but sometimes they put like ham slices in it. And you're like, one time I screamed from the buffet line, "Who did this? Who did this to me?" So it can't have Jello is the primary rule. Um,
Gotcha.
but okay, but on a Pollock, it's those peanut butter marshmallow squares that they have to cut in out of bar.
Okay.
It's anything from
Okay.
Minnesota. Gosh, I love the upper middle west. So good.
Gotcha. Most famous person you've ever had a chance to hang out with.
Matthew McConaughey, I guess.
Okay. Cool. Describe yourself with one word.
Ruthless.
Ruthless. Oh, cool. And what current series are you binging on?
I really loved Faraway Downs. It's Hugh Jackman and Nicole Kidman being too charismatic that it explodes the screen.
Okay, great. Best advice you've ever received.
You were never going to do this on your own.
Ah, love it, love it. And the last one, if you were a bishop in the United Methodist Church for a day, what would you do with it?
Oh, that's a spa day for you guys. You've had a rough couple years. You're doing great.
Go to the spa. I love it. Maybe I'll reroute myself for the rest of the day. Uh, Kate, you've been fabulous. Any sort of closing words that you'd like to offer to wrap up?
Do you mind if I just then I'll just bless us for a second as you go out into your day?
Please,
I've got a little
please.
blessing for a beautiful, terrible day. I know you guys
Great.
are regrouping and creating new momentum, and trying new things, being your beautiful selves in an unknown world. So you know precarity more than I do. So thank you so much for having me. Bishop, you're so good at this. You're such a
Thank you.
warm, wonderful, compassionate interviewer. I felt so honored to be with you guys. So thank you, thank you.
Thank,
It's
thank you.
it's dumb that you appreciate any of this, and I am grateful. So here we go. Here is a
We're
blessing for a
grateful for
beautiful,
you. Okay.
terrible day. Blessed are we, the anxious, with eyes
Mm,
wide open to the lovely and the awful.
mhm.
Blessed are we, the aware, knowing that the only sane thing to do in such a world is to admit the fear that sits in our peripheral vision. Blessed are we, the hopeful, eyes searching for the horizon, ready to meet the next miracle, the next surprise. Yes, blessed are we, the grateful, awake to this beautiful, terrible day. Thank you, my loves. What a gift to be with you.
Amen. Thank you. We're grateful. We know that you've got some time constraints, but thank you for giving yourself to us today.
My joy. My
Be
joy.
encouraged. Be encouraged. All right.
Yeah.
Dear friends, thank you all for joining Kate and I today. Thanks again to our sponsors, Methodist Theological School in Ohio, Ohio Health, and Cokesbury, and their imprint, Abingdon, and their digital imprint, Amplify. Always so grateful to the staff of the West Ohio Conference that literally provide the infrastructure that allow us to do things like this, but especially our Office of Communications and Brad Aycock and his team in the Office of Fresh Starts and New Beginnings. Now, friends, on March 11th, so we're not coming to you every week like we did, but March 11th, we have the high privilege, and Kate will send you a link if you've got time. We've
Love it.
got Brian Stevenson of the Equal Justice Initiative. He'll be on in a format similar to this for about an hour and a half. So if you're available, but we'll send you the link to see the recording if you're not available. But Brian Stevenson and everybody who's registered for it will receive a copy of Brian's book, Just Mercy. He's going to give us a clue and a peer into his life, his ministry of justice, what he's done at the Equal Justice Initiative, how he goes about the world engaging people in important discussions. You'll hear about his significant 4 pillars that we all need to embrace if we're going to do justice work and have the resilience to sustain it across time. So please, please, please lock in, tune in March 11th, Brian Stevenson, and we're grateful that we've finally been able to get him. Kate, it's been a blast. Much love, and be of a good courage today.
Oh, thank you, loves. Have a good day.